You very upset about that?
Personally, I was, because I don't think the president should have done that at that time. We in the kingdom have pursued policies in the Arab world. Some call them cautious, some call them very slow, etc. But we prefer to let the people take a stand first, and then we make our decisions. And I'll give you an example. In 1952, when the Egyptian revolution took place under Jamal Abdel Nasser against King Farouk.
Right.
King Farouk had been a very close friend of King Abdulaziz in Saudi Arabia. Very close. The only country that King Abdulaziz visited officially was Egypt, at the invitation of King Farouk. But there was this coup d'etat, and a group of officers took over from King Farouk, and Farouk was sent into exile. So King Abdulaziz sent his foreign minister at the time, who later became King Faisal,
Right.
and told him, meet with these people and tell them the following, that we deal with the people of Egypt, not with the leaders. Our main thrust is to have good relations with the people of Egypt. I, King Abdulaziz, will continue to have good relations with the ex-King Farouk. But that does not mean that I object to the leadership that the people of Egypt accepted. And when King Faisal said that to the Revolutionary Council, one of the officers who was there, who were totally unknown to King Faisal at the time, stood up and he said, Your Highness, he was at the time the foreign minister, this is the first time that we hear words like that from any visitor to Egypt. And afterwards, the late King Faisal asked his ambassador to Cairo, who was that officer who spoke for this group? And he told him, this is Jamal Abdel Nasser. And there developed a personal friendship between the two. Anyway, and this is the same message that our foreign minister took to the leadership of both Egypt and Tunis when he visited them, that we accept what the Egyptian people and what the Tunisian people have decided, but we do not anticipate what those people will do and say.
But that is not the message that you sent to the people of Bahrain.
Bahrain is a country that is in alliance and in agreement with Saudi Arabia as a member of the GCC, in which the legitimate government in Bahrain called for help from its GCC partners to protect vital installations in Bahrain. And the Saudi and Emirati troops and subsequently Qatari troops that went there, they went to protect the seaport, the airport, the refinery, and the business district. They had absolutely no involvement in any of the demonstrations or the quelling of demonstrations by Bahraini forces. And if you look at satellite pictures of Bahrain today, Google Earth, for example, you will see that these forces are encamped around these areas that I told you about.
So if I said to you the popular conventional wisdom was that the Saudis went in there to make sure that there was no revolution in Bahrain to overthrow the monarchy in the same way that there had been a revolution in Tunisia and in Egypt and in Libya, you would say?
I would say that Saudi Arabia before, during, and after those events in Bahrain called for negotiations between the government and the people.
And what's the status of those negotiations in a country that's majority Shia and a Sunni minority royal family?
But also a Sunni sizable minority of the people. King Hamad of Bahrain started an independent commission to investigate the events that happened back in February and March in Bahrain. That investigation is ongoing. He has called for negotiations, and they've held several sessions of negotiations in Bahrain with all of the opposing parties. One of those opposing parties, Al-Wifaq, has decided not to negotiate and have decided to keep outside of the negotiations. And yet King Hamad and his negotiators continue to say that they're hoping that the Al-Wifaq will come back and negotiate. There are going to be elections, I think, in October to fill the vacant seats that were vacated by Al-Wifaq when they resigned from the parliament in Bahrain. And it's an ongoing story there. And my point on Bahrain is that negotiation is what is required. Not bloodshed, and definitely not draconian measures, as has happened. Even Bahrainis will admit that some quelling of the disturbances went beyond what is needed for keeping the peace.
Did the Obama administration's handling of these events across the board cause you and the Saudi government to admire them more or less?
I can't speak for the Saudi government.
How about you?
But me personally, I think the Obama administration, probably like all administrations anywhere in the world, will address their local interests and internal interests in order not to be, if you like, blamed for anything that might happen somewhere and they did not take a position on it. So I think they were more concerned about what Congress would say about what happened in Bahrain than basically what the true measure of what the happening in Bahrain was. And from that context, as an individual, I wish that they would be less quick about making statements and allowing things to appear to what they really are, rather than trying to influence them from the very beginning.
You are one of the people that I know that met Osama bin Laden, correct?
Yes.
Negotiated with him.
Not negotiated with him. Tried to get Mullah Omar to hand him over to the kingdom.
Right.
Yes.
You approve of what the United States did?
Absolutely.
And do you think because of that and because of the Arab Spring and because of increased ability of the United States and others to kill al-Qaeda leadership, that the battle against those forces is becoming much more successful, and the appeal of their rhetoric in the region is much less?
I think that such a philosophy as bin Laden pursued has absolutely no appeal in the area because of the viciousness and the outright criminality of the actions that they have undertaken, not just in their attack on the Twin Towers here in the United States, but everywhere. You look anywhere, whether it is Indonesia or Turkey or Saudi Arabia or UK or Spain or wherever. The Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula today in the Yemen, the Al-Qaeda in North Africa, from Algeria and the Niger and Mali and Morocco. They're simply killing innocents. And that, in my view, is the main reason why they lost their appeal. Of course, eliminating their leadership is very helpful. And I must say here that the U.S. deserves more kudos for getting rid of bin Laden than even Americans are taking credit for. And this is another irony in the situation. I would have thought that the jubilation that we saw on television about people going in the streets when the announcement of bin Laden's death happened should have been translated into workable action. The war on Al-Qaeda should have been declared finished by the United States. And
well, it's hard to say that when you've got what's going on in Yemen.
Well, you can continue to fight in Yemen, but your presence in Afghanistan is creating a national resistance to that presence that goes beyond Al-Qaeda or the Taliban. And by declaring victory after killing Osama bin Laden, you could have withdrawn your military forces from Afghanistan quicker, I think, than you planned to do.
That argument was made, actually, by some, not loudly, but argument was made that if, in fact, Al-Qaeda is the reason that you're there, then you have a more compelling reason to leave.
And that's what Mr. Bush said, and that's what Mr. Obama said.
So at the end of the day, when you and your friends from the royal family in Saudi Arabia talk about what worries you the most, is there a consensus over what is the greatest threat to the world that you would like to see?
You know, the world is a changing world. And one of the constants in my life has been the continued problem in Palestine. It eats at every emotion and existential fiber, not just in me, but I think in people in the area in general. And when you see what price is being paid by innocents because of that conflict, it's strange for me that people haven't resolved it in the last 50 years. And it remains the heart and the core of all of the passions that arise, whether in Iraq, in Iran, in Syria, in Yemen. You go across the board from Mauritania all the way to the southern Philippines, and you see the resonance in that.
Yeah. There's clearly a resonance, but many would want to step forward and say, not every problem, every country that does things that are not good can be laid at the absence of an agreement between Palestinians and the Israelis.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that everybody is paying a price for that. And generally the people who pay the price are the innocents. The people who get blown up when suicide bombers attack a cafe in Tel Aviv, or when they blow up a subway train in London, or when they attack a compound in Riyadh. There is always that resonance with Palestine. Recruitment on the internet, in the cyberspace for terrorism, generally concentrates on the plight of Palestinians. You've seen that, I'm sure. Others have made studies of.
No, I know, but at the same time, it was not a rallying cry for Osama bin Laden. He came late to simply admitting that one more part of his grievances.
Well,
I mean, he was more interested in overthrowing you.
Absolutely, but he used the Palestinian issue to recruit young ones.
And so does the Iranians, and so
everybody who wants to acquire a certain. Prestige.
You give them an argument.
You give them an argument with that.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you again, and I'm glad you're in good health.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you, and I look forward to doing it again and coming to Saudi Arabia and talking to you about the series that we're doing on Islam. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.